The Ghost of Bryant's Gap. Our travels have taken us to many places. Tonto and I have been through lush meadows, over mountains, and across rushing rivers in pursuit of justice. However, this story is one of remembrance, and it is one of realization. Of all the places in Texas, Bryant's Gap, for me, was the most unwelcome, and rightly so. My brother Dan and I were in pursuit of one Butch Cavendish on one hot and blustery day. We had ridden hard, chasing this bandit and his gang, and we were closer to him than we had first thought. As we eased through the narrow passage of the canyon, we could not have known that we were riding to our fate. One of our own, Ranger Collins, was also one of Cavendish's men, and he had indeed betrayed us and our intents to the bandit himself. The corridor of the gap was no more than 2 horses wide for the most part, but widened to 5 horses at a certain point. We were going to rest from the heat at its widest point. As we dismounted, we noticed that Ranger Collins was nowhere to be found. That gave us an uneasy feeling, to say the least. It wasn't until we heard a small rock fall down from the cliffs above ahead of us that things started to add up. But we were too late. The first shot rang out like a stick of dynamite in that confined spot, and then soon blasts were all around. We were like fish in a barrel. One by one, each ranger fell to the ground. My brother and I were the last to fall. I made it to him to try to comfort and help him, but I too was severely wounded in the ambush. Just before everything went black, I caught a glimpse of Ranger Collins walking through the fallen rangers and kicking their boots to make sure they were dead. The rest of the story is very well known. It had been exactly 10 years to the day that the ambush happened. The shortest route to our destination was straight through Bryant's Gap. Tonto and I did not have the convenience to ride around the canyon because time was of the essence. We had just sent a telegraph to the marshal of San Antonio as to the whereabouts of one Jimmy Jack Williams. We were on his trail and informed the marshal to meet us on the other side of the pass so we could get our bearings on his probable destination. We had 2 locations in mind, Backwater Creek or the Singing Caverns. He was definitely at one or the other. As Tonto and I entered the mouth of the gap, an overwhelming sense of dread came over me. I had not been there in 10 years. What was I to expect? Were the graves that Tonto dug still there? Many thoughts entered my mind. The way through seemed more narrow than I remembered it. The walls of the canyon seemed to be squeezing the life out of me once again. I was having a little trouble breathing, and the sun was just as hot as it was that fateful day. It seemed as though I was sweating silver bullets. As we approached the 5-horse wide area, I asked Tonto to halt and allow me to go in first. Silver and I slowly walked into the area. One by one, 6 graves came into view. Glints on the ground from the sunlight revealed themselves to be brass cartridge casings from that fateful day. The walls of the canyon have somehow eerily preserved the scene. The shells look as though a ranger had just ejected them for reloading to continue the fight. Pock marks in the once smooth rock walls tell of missed targets by the men on the cliffs. Upon reaching the mounds of dirt on the canyon floor, I dismounted Silver and walked over to them. Upon each mound, I placed a silver bullet and a promise of justice to them as long as I lived. As I spoke the final word of my pledge, I heard a small rock fall from the ledge above me. Then, from out of nowhere, a whisper said, "John, take cover." I gave no time to figure out if it was my imagination or not, as I dashed under a rock overhang. I called to Tonto to take cover as well, but there was no answer from him. The whisper, I noted, sounded familiar, like my brother, Dan. But how? I scanned the above ledges for glints of gunmetal and movement, but I saw nothing, and all returned to dead silence. Just silence. I crept out from under the ledge with both guns drawn, expecting the unexpected, but nothing happened. I felt like a little boy, being scared of monsters that weren't there. I called for Tonto again, but no answer. I then noticed the small cave where Tonto had cared for me during my healing from the wounds that I had acquired during the ambush. The little stream still flowed, and the black soot from the many nights of Tonto's campfires was still visible as a shadow on the ground. My deepest gratitude to my friend at this point. He was there for me when no one else but the enemy was. If it wasn't for Tonto, I would not be alive. I called to him again, but no reply was given. I finally mounted Silver and went back to where I had left he and Scout to wait, but they were not there. Their tracks led back out of the canyon. That's when I heard it. A gunshot. Bam! It sounded like it was coming from the ambush site and above on the ledge. I hurried back to the gravesite and dismounted Silver, and then heard another shot. Bam! Silver was spooked somewhat and was startled enough to rear. Then what sounded like a handful of rocks swiftly rained down from the ledge. I knew someone was up there, and they were shooting. It wasn't my imagination. This was really happening again. That's when I heard the whisper again. "It's all right, John." As I looked over to the graves, I saw a small dust devil rising up from the one that Tonto had dug for my brother. After that, I heard the whispering voice no more. The sweat from under my mask and hat made it feel like that they were glued to my head. I was in a very tight spot, totally at the mercy of the canyon and whomever was up there. That's when I saw Tonto above me. "Kimosabe," he yelled. "Me check cliff. Kill 'em rattlesnake." My heart sank and rose at the same time. I just sighed and yelled back to him, "Be careful up there." I mounted Silver and continued out the other side of Bryant's Gap, where Tonto came down from his lofty perch, carrying a diamondback and shaking his tail. Up in the distance we saw the marshal, waving and riding to meet us. When we got close enough, we all dismounted, and I went to my saddlebags to retrieve my map, when I noticed something very strange. There on Silver's white coat, close to where his tail is on his rump, was a blackened, sooty handprint. I know that bad things happen to good people because of bad people. I am living proof. But I also know that your past and your fears only have as much power over you as you give them. Who you were doesn't define who you are. Who you become as a result is all that matters, and there are unseen guides along the way. Of this fact I am quite certain. The end.